Joe and Olga were a handsome, wealthy couple who had been husband and wife for a little more than 3 months.
They went to the Caribbean and got married like on a beach and honeymoon there. It was wonderful.
Never imagining that when they promised to love each other till death do them part, that they were destined to share just 107 days of wedded bliss together.
He was so happy with her and she was happy with him.
The attraction had been instant after Joe and Olga, both in their 30s, met at an online dating site.
It really hit it off. It was a real love affair right from the start.
From everybody's accounts, they said they were completely in love.
It was apparent the two were well matched and similar in many ways, both of them well liked for their friendly, vibrant personalities and lust for life. The rest of Joe's family also highly approved of Olga.
He took her over to his house and introduced her to his mother, and she could see just how happy both of them were.
Joe, a confirmed bachelor, knew Olga was the woman he never thought he'd meet, and he worshipped the elegant Russian-born blonde who'd been briefly married once before.
That was legitimately the love of his life. His world revolved around her. If you were disrespectful to her, you were no longer part of his life.
And during their short time together, Joe and Olga enjoyed a dream life, indulging their love of boating, deep-sea fishing, and lavish vacations in exotic locations.
They traveled a lot. They loved fine dining, buying caviar and whatever Russian delicacies she really liked.
Joe lavishing every luxury his money could buy on his new bride, including a $100,000 Mercedes.
It was a really beautiful convertible, so they went in style.
But Joe could afford it as the co-owner of a booming upscale auto repair business.
It did like $1 million a year, and it would have only been around for a couple years.
Olga, a one-time stocks trader, could take a great deal of credit for the success of the operation.
Olga was a part of the shop. She worked there.
She was a big part. So when people walked into that shop, they were greeted by this very attractive blonde Russian woman with an accent who was super nice, super friendly, super personable.
Joe and Olga had good reason to be excited about their future together. They were planning to start a family. But Olga and Joe wouldn't get the chance to be mom and pop. Both their lives about to be suddenly snuffed out on the very night they're celebrating Olga's 39th birthday at a local night spot, where the love-struck couple share what will turn out to be literally their last dance.
They had stayed to dance some more and have another drink.
Then head home to a date with fate. According to investigators, the couple parked in this area. They retrieved their mail from this spot, and then they walked right down this sidewalk to their building and ultimately their death.
Newcastle County 911.
At 1:43 a.m., the county police department is getting multiple calls from neighbors, shaken from their sleep by the sound of gunfire.
I just heard arguing, and the last thing I heard was what the and then 3 gunshots.
Another tenant in their Paladin Club condo complex can see Olga lying on the ground outside her door.
Obviously, she's hurt. Okay. There's blood all over her face.
And a third neighbor calls from her side.
I think she's cautious, but she's pretty weak.
Okay, is she able to talk at all?
She might, but I'm not sure.
Now other residents have also come to Olga's aid.
Is she still breathing?
I think she's bleeding, but she's in trouble.
Okay, we're almost there. I just want you to keep her comfortable and just make sure she's still breathing, okay?
She's laying on the ground. She has blood all over her body.
And cops arrive at the newlyweds condo to find a critically wounded Olga lying motionless in a pool of blood, but still alive.
When I had arrived, the medics were on scene and they were down here working on Olga.
Corporal Kelly Richards was the first police officer at the crime scene.
She was breathing, but she was struggling, what maybe would be described as agonal type breaths. She was fighting for her life.
From a bullet to the head.
She had a gunshot wound to the cheek and would appear to be possibly exit wound out the back of the head.
And while medics are trying to keep Olga alive, police make another shocking discovery.
We have a second victim in the bushes here. A white male, multiple gunshot wounds.
finding Olga's new husband Joe lying dead in a remote corner of the front garden.
His body was lying face down on the ground. He was positioned approximately right here. He had several gunshot wounds to the torso area, one apparent gunshot wound to the back of the head. His head was actually laying in his hand, and he had his hand out holding his cell phone.
Corporal Richards was hoping Olga would survive to tell her who did this to her and Joe.
Did she say anything? Could she even verbalize any words at all?
No, she didn't say anything.
Tragically, a short time later, Olga is declared dead in the ER.
Just the way that they had died was very tragic.
Joe's sister Kelly says she was so shocked when she learned about the killings, she called her mother to see if it was true.
And I said, Mom, has Joey been shot? And she was crying. She's like, she got out the words, Joey and Olga are dead.
Evidence at the crime scene suggests Joe and Olga had been ambushed by a gunman, or possibly two gunmen, lying in wait for them to return home.
We found several pieces of evidence that led us to believe that the shooters were right actually next to the front door.
And there were shell casings all over this place.
Yes, there was several shell casings of two different types of calibers, and there was also a few live rounds.
But without Olga, police have no eyewitnesses and very little other evidence to go on.
Any surveillance on this building at all?
No.
Robbery would immediately be discounted as a motive when police learn nothing had been taken from Joe or Olga.
He had his wallet with in excess of $100 in cash. Her purse was there. Her phone was there. She had a pretty large diamond ring that was on her finger. All that stuff is still there.
Police chief for the Newcastle County said this was not a botched robbery. We know that for a fact. This was a deliberate hit.
You believed early on that Joe and Olga were targeted.
Yes, and the way that they were killed, the ambush at their front door, I mean, the keys were still in the door.
And as the mystery deepens, wild rumors would begin to swirl around town. Among them, that Joe, a bodybuilder known to have used steroids, may have had a run-in with a drug-dealing Russian crime syndicate.
One of the theories was maybe the Russians were involved in the underworld steroid business. And maybe he had a bad deal with somebody.
But detectives don't buy it.
We were never able to find anything more to that theory.
They would also take a look at Olga's former husband, wondering if jealousy could have been the motive for the murder of the newlyweds.
We had to then investigate.
But Olga's ex is cleared after he provides police with a verified alibi, leaving investigators literally without a clue.
So we didn't know what was going on. It was really a puzzle, I guess, to try to figure out.
And then detectives get what appears to be their first solid lead, shockingly pointing to one of Joe's own family members as the possible killer. His little sister and Olga's new sister-in-law, Kelly.
It was something that we couldn't just shove to the side. We either had to determine if it was credible or rule it out.
Friends of the family and even Kelly's own mother had told police they were suspicious of Kelly because she'd been locked in a bitter feud with Joe over a $20,000 diamond ring. Kelly sat down with Crime Watch Daily to set the record straight.
This ring was given to me by my father and my mom on my wedding day 10 years prior.
But her mother had taken the ring and re-gifted it to Joe's new bride as a wedding present.
Joe's mother wanted Joe to have a beautiful ring for Olga.
And Kelly is infuriated with her brother for even accepting it and leading Olga to believe he bought it.
On Joe's honeymoon, she texted him about it and sent some pretty nasty things.
Kelly would only become more angry when Joe finally returns the ring and she discovers the diamonds have been replaced with cubic zirconia.
I confronted Joe, and he was really angry at me for just confronting him. He was afraid Olga was going to find out where the ring came from.
And when the newlyweds' condo just happens to be burglarized a short time later, Kelly is Joe's prime suspect.
Joe accused you of breaking into his home.
He did.
Was anything taken during that robbery?
All their jewelry.
Including Kelly's diamonds, which Joe had mounted on a new ring for Olga.
So you could understand why Joe thought you did that.
Yes.
Kelly can also understand why detectives are suspicious of her when Joe and Olga are murdered just a little more than a month after the burglary.
At what point did investigators begin to focus in and question you more?
I felt the heat immediately.
Circumstance had forced detectives to consider the unthinkable. That Joe Connell's young sister Kelly may have murdered her own brother and his new wife Olga.
It's pretty shocking.
I think initially they were covering all their bases. You know, here's someone who had a feud with her brother at the end of his life and wasn't talking to him.
After Joe had taken $20,000 worth of diamonds off a ring given to Kelly by their parents and had them mounted on the ring he slipped on Olga's finger at the time of their wedding.
A number of us were looking into the family issue these three have really, because Olga's involved in it too.
But Kelly is not the only one showing up on detectives' radar.
As police began to investigate Joe and his wife Olga's murders, the spotlight would soon turn on Joe's business partner and best friend, Chris Rivers.
There's another group that's looking into who Joe's business partner was, where his business was, what type of business it was.
How long have you known Joe?
I've known him for probably about 10 years.
What'd you guys meet?
Just being in the same business, mechanic business.
Detectives have not informed him that Joe is dead. And, oddly, Rivers doesn't even ask why he's being questioned about him.
He never asked, like, is everything okay with him?
No.
But they realize Rivers may have simply assumed Joe was in trouble with the law.
His response initially was, what did he do now?
Rivers is also behaving as if Joe really was still alive.
Anytime he wanted to tell me about something Joe was involved in, he made me promise him that I wouldn't tell him.
Promise me you won't repeat it to him.
Yes. Promise me you won't tell Joe what I'm getting ready to tell you.
And then, hardly sounding like a best friend, Rivers reveals that, like Joe's sister Kelly, he too had been locked in a nasty ongoing dispute with him.
I guess the last 6 or 8 months, I noticed he stopped working, stopped coming to work. He'd leave early. People start stopping by the shop. He buys a $100,000 car.
He tells detectives it came to an ugly showdown after he learned that bodybuilder Joe was not only using steroids, but also dealing them from their business premises.
The other guy that works for me comes up to me and goes, "Joe's selling drugs out of the back of the shop." And I was like, "What?" So I searched the shop, found him, and said to him, "Get him out. I don't want it here. I'm not losing the frickin' place over this."
And detectives would later learn the allegation was apparently true.
From what we can determine, he picks up this steroid addiction. And then he sees there's money in it, so he starts selling.
Sergeant Leonard says Rivers would go on to reveal other dark secrets about Joe, including the fact that he had served more than 7 years in prison for pointing a shotgun at a police officer during a bar brawl.
And now he has this opportunity to talk in detail about, Joe's criminal history, Joe's steroid sales, Joe's problems with his family.
And Detective Leonard asks Rivers about Joe's feud with Sister Kelly as part of their simultaneous investigation of her.
You know any more about this thing, this beef within his family, what that's all about?
I mean, just over the jewelry is really all I know about.
No details about it?
I mean, every day there's something dramatic going on with that family. Every day.
Are they like that?
Yeah. They're always arguing over money. They're always arguing over something. I mean, it's every day there's drama.
Still not telling him that Joe and Olga are dead, detectives ask Rivers about his whereabouts the night they were murdered.
The last you talked to him was what time? You said
11-ish.
Okay.
10:30, 11-ish maybe.
When Joe was out with Olga celebrating her 39th birthday.
I was supposed to go down there, and I ended up working at the shop till about 10:30, 11. And then I went home, got in the shower, and then by the time I was going to go down there, it wasn't even worth going down.
Rivers tells detectives he stayed in the rest of the night with his girlfriend, who would corroborate his alibi. And he would also turn out to have a clean record.
There was nothing that popped out on it in his background at its initial stages that would think, wow, well, this is the right guy.
Investigators even explore the possibility Rivers may have had a partner in crime.
He was looked at rather closely as well.
He was. Police spent a lot of time investigating him and looking into that.
Nor did Rivers seem like their killer when detectives finally told him that Joe and Olga had been murdered.
What was his reaction?
He was upset.
Both of them were killed.
At the same time Rivers is being questioned, detectives also continue to interview Joe's sister Kelly about the murders.
Was she cooperative?
Absolutely.
And with Rivers also cooperating, investigators still don't have any clear suspect or new leads.
There wasn't DNA, there wasn't surveillance, there were no eyewitnesses.
But then, a bizarre and stunning break in the case.
One of his good friends said the guy had custom-made bathing suits.
And Joe Connell's business partner and so-called best friend, Chris Rivers, had told detectives that the luxury-loving newlyweds were living beyond their means.
How much money would you say he's getting out of the business as opposed to?
Not that much. Not enough to do that lifestyle. No way.
Investigators consider the possibility Joe and his new bride Olga could have been killed by an angry creditor.
It was one of the possible theories out there of what could have happened.
But without any other leads, the focus of the investigation remains on Chris Rivers and Joe's sister Kelly, who'd been locked in a bitter family feud with him at the time of the killings. And she would also come under the close scrutiny of a national TV news program.
Talking about the possible theory that Kelly Connell had committed the murder.
But police ultimately verify Kelly's alibi for the night of the murders. She tells Crime Watch Daily, despite their feud, she truly loved her brother and his bride.
I've never seen two people in love like that. That was the happiest I've ever seen my brother. She's beautiful, sweetheart, sophisticated, and she treated my brother wonderful.
And detectives become convinced she had nothing to do with their murders.
She had had a medical procedure done not a week or two before this that would have rendered her more or less not capable of killing her brother and his wife.
Now that leaves just Chris Rivers, who had already aroused the suspicion of investigators by ratting out Joe for using steroids and accusing him of selling them at their auto shop.
And I went in there, and I ripped the whole place apart. And I found it back there, and it was a lot.
Rivers didn't realize he had just snitched on himself, too.
Did you secure a search warrant for the business?
We did.
What did you find when you went in?
Various records, computers, and the steroids that Chris told us right where they were.
And surprise, surprise, Rivers is arrested.
What was he charged with?
Possession of steroids and it was a felony.
And now Rivers, out on bail, refuses to talk anymore to detectives.
Once he was charged, he retained legal counsel. So from that point on, we couldn't bring him back in.
But to their astonishment, he starts talking to someone else.
He said, here's the deal. We found drugs in your building. Joe's dead. You're responsible.
Chris Rivers gives a video-recorded interview to a local newspaper reporter, Chris Barish.
How smart was that?
I think in retrospect, it proved to be quite problematic for him in some of the responses that he gave.
Investigators couldn't believe it was the same man who had spoken so ill of his dearly departed business partner just days earlier.
Ever since he started doing this whole drug thing, I kind of distanced myself from him.
But now Rivers is telling Barish of the Wilmington News Journal just the opposite.
How's your relationship up to the day he died?
Figures you see somebody every day, 12 hours a day more than you see your wife. So we were pretty much best friends.
And the police wanted our copies of the interview because they wanted to match it to their, and they really wanted to pick it apart to look for inconsistencies.
And it's Joe's my best friend, and how broken up he was, and how close they were, and how much, they got along.
Investigators know that Rivers is either lying to Barish or lying to them.
Did it not add up to what he told you initially?
He just didn't seem genuine throughout it.
Like when Rivers calls detectives telling him Joe and Olga had been murdered.
I just didn't believe it. I still don't believe it.
And investigators didn't believe Rivers.
You could just watch it and say, he's lying, he's lying.
So now they dig a little deeper into his life and make a shocking discovery.
You're looking at a guy who's using massive amounts of opioid-based painkillers, not to mention cocaine, who is complete financial mess.
And allegedly flipping out under the pressure of massive debt.
During this time, I was getting reports about Rivers unraveling, that his drug use was out of control, and that he was paranoid, and that he was telling people that he had done the murders.
Rivers would also be arrested twice more for robbery and criminal mischief linked to his drug abuse.
He was really just falling apart.
And then the investigators find the proverbial smoking gun.
The biggest break and the most compelling evidence we had in the case were the phones.
Uncovering records of deleted text and calls showing that Chris Rivers had kept in contact with a career criminal named Joshua Bay the night Joe and Olga were murdered.
There was this whole flurry of texts and phone calls. Chris is contacting Joe, but he's also contacting Bay, and Bay's contacting 2 other people.
And Bay would eventually cut a plea deal in return for spilling the beans.
He's the linchpin of this entire investigation.
The only way out of this is to turn on Chris.
Telling investigators Rivers had promised him $60,000 to arrange the murders, which Bay says were committed by a pair of hitmen he hired, Aaron Thompson and Dominique Benson. But why did Rivers want his partner and man he called best friend dead? Cops always say, follow the money. And when they do, it leads to a $1 million life insurance policy, a policy taken out when Joe and Rivers went in business together.
He's greedy. He has debts. He decided Joe has to go. But if he's going to collect the insurance policy, Joe's married, so his wife would probably get his share of it. So he's got to get rid of her too.
Rivers would be arrested at his auto shop.
What was his reaction?
It didn't seem surprised. I believe he knew what was coming.
He would ultimately be convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life plus 50 years in prison for plotting the murders of Joe and Olga Connell. Rivers' middleman, Joshua Bay, pleaded guilty to first-degree conspiracy and got 5 years behind bars. Aaron Thompson was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy for being the triggerman and sentenced to life. And Dominique Benson was sentenced to 5 years for conspiracy after being acquitted of being the second triggerman.
What the case was all about was a young couple that were just starting their lives together and had to come to this end for no reason but Christopher Rivers' greed.
Joe's sister Kelly says nothing will ever heal her heartbreak over the loss of her brother and his bride, the horror of initially being suspected of killing them, and the agony of seeing what the murders have done to their loved ones, as she revealed in a victim impact letter read to the jury.
The hardest part has been seeing how much pain Christopher Rivers has caused to my father, my brother, my mom, and my children. I want to take their pain away, but I can't. It never goes away. We lost the heart of our family.